I was very fortunate recently to have dinner with someone worth billions of dollars. And I turn up to this dinner in Dubai, we're near the Burj Khalifa. I turn up to dinner in Dubai, I've got a notepad and a pen, and I'm asking question after question after question. This dude, he probably didn't know what hit him. And if you're watching this, mate, I apologize. But I asked him a question and he gave me an answer. And he gave me an answer that I think is so profound and so important that I wanted to share it with you on this video. And he basically said, I said to him, I was like, what's the one thing? Like, what's the one big thing that allows you to get so good at business that you've made billions and billions of dollars? And he kind of laughed a second, sort of looked over to the side and cocked his head and thought for a second. And he gave me the answer. And it's something that I've already been aware of and cognizant of, but he explained it in a way that was so profound and so mind-changing for me. I was like, oh, so now I understand how billionaires see the world. And what I'm going to do in this video is explain that thing, and I'm going to reiterate what he told me during this dinner. And this should give you a lot of faith. This guy has made a heap of money, and he basically told me the secret. And he was like, yeah, I got rich when I understood this, was basically the overall consensus of this thing that he was saying. And so the thing in question is multidisciplinary thinking. Now, hang on, before you click off the video, because I've satiated your curiosity, just let me explain what this actually means. Because I was expecting him to say like, obviously I wasn't quite expecting this, but when people look for the one big thing, they're expecting a sales script or a cold message or a specific person to come into the business. But he gave me multidisciplinary thinking. And I've known about multidisciplinary thinking before because I've studied Charlie Munger, I've studied Benjamin Franklin and other people. But he explained this to me in a way that was ridiculous. So basically the question that I asked him, point blank, was how do I get better at business? Like, how do I get good at this thing? What is business? How do I get good at it? And the answer he gave was multidisciplinary thinking. Now, this reminded me of a time when I used to work for a shoe company. I used to work when I was like 17 years old in a call center for a shoe manufacturer, a very famous shoe manufacturer in the UK. And one day I was in customer care, I had my headset on, and I knew the CEO was coming in. His name was Mike, CEO of this big company. And it's very rare that the management would come down to the customer care floor. And he came in and I actually went over to him. I put my phone on pause, and I went over to him and I said, I really want to start a business. Do you mind if I ask you a question? And he was like, sure, like entertained it for a second. He was probably pissed off because he was trying to talk to the customer care manager at the time. And I said to him, I was like, look, just what's the one thing? What's one thing that you wish you knew when you started? And he gave me the same answer. And I never really appreciated it until now, until I had this conversation with this person. I never really got it. And Mike basically said to me, you can't put yourself in a silo. If you want to be a CEO, you need to know everything about everything. You can't just do marketing, you can't just do accounting, you can't just do like the finance, you can't just do product. You need to know and be better at all those people about everything. Now, he also said like, you need to delegate and give like people who are better than stuff at you tasks, but you need to know it all. And so when I asked this billionaire, I said like, how do I get better at business? He told me it's about multidisciplinary thinking. Let me explain what multidisciplinary thinking basically is. And then I'm going to explain how to do it. And then I'm going to basically give you some examples that I've learned and that he told me about. So multidisciplinary thinking, we'll just put multidisciplinary thinking. This was popularized by Charlie Munger. And what it basically is in life or in reality or in the universe, there are disciplines. And a discipline is essentially, this thing here, a discipline is a field of study. And so, for example, when you go to university, you could study the discipline of philosophy, or you could study the discipline of economics, or you could study the discipline of psychology. The problem is that business itself isn't really a discipline. Because when you think about business and you ask yourself, well, what is business? It's really hard to define this thing and to learn how to do it. And this is why at uni and universities and colleges, like going to do business studies, it's kind of interesting how they teach it, because what they end up doing if you go to study business is they end up teaching you everything inside of business. So that could be, accounting, or it could be, other financial stuff, it could be tax, or it could be strategy, or it could be management. Like, you can't study business because business is a collection of disciplines, if that makes sense. And so if you want to get good at business, you get good at the disciplines comprised of it. And so I see this all the time where people try and teach business and they try and learn business, but what you actually want to do is get extremely good at the first principles of all the components that make up the whole. You're kind of like a chef. What makes good food really good ingredients? What are the ingredients of this topic? All of these things down here. And so this billionaire basically was taking the liberty of explaining to me that the way he sees the world and the way he sees his business is through the lens of other disciplines. And I've been doing this myself for quite some time, probably nowhere near on the level that this guy has. But I've been aware of this. And so what I want to do is I want to explain how to think in multidisciplinary terms. And I'm going to give you lots of examples to solidify this abstraction so that you can hopefully apply it to your business and make a ton of money. And I think that Naval Ravikant, I think he said this as well. You don't study business, you study the disciplines of business. So it's a pretty important thing. So I'm going to give you an example and then we're going to invert and work back from there. So one example is one of the disciplines we can look at is economics. So economics, basically founded by Adam Smith. He's actually Scottish, believe it or not, I think. Economics is a discipline and it's the study of the economy. It's the study of the macroeconomic systems that govern our society. And economics is really it's like a manifestation of commercial interaction. It just happened. Like, we didn't create it, we didn't invent it. It kind of just came about as a result of us trading and, having incentives and supply and demand and stuff like that. And so with economics, what we can do with a discipline, because you might be thinking, okay, well, I know what economics is, but how the hell does that matter to my business? Well, what we're doing with economics is we can understand something called the foundations or first principles, or, there are key mental models buried inside of each discipline. And what you can do when you study a discipline, or you study the founding father or the original textbook of the discipline, is you can start to extrapolate the key principles and apply them to your business so that you can become more successful. And so really making money online and building a successful company is about being able to see the world objectively and dealing with things in the right way and making the right decisions. And the best way to do that is to be able to see what is right, and the easiest way to see what is right is to have the right disciplines. So let me explain. So in economics, there's a ton of different models, tons of different foundations, but you've got a couple like the law of self-interest. You've got the law of diminishing returns, fairly obvious one. What else have we got? We've got, you obviously have, what's it called, supply and demand, which is a pretty obvious one. But, there's loads, there's tons. But what we can do, when you understand the core abstractions that pretty much just light up the universe, like, when you think about it like this. And this is how this guy explained it to me, this billionaire. He didn't explain it in this exact term, but verbatim, right? It's kind of like reality is dark, and it's just one big plane of darkness. And when you learn a new discipline, and when you learn a foundation inside of that discipline, what you're doing is you're turning a light on in the dark, and you can now see a little bit clearer than you could before. So imagine that, your understanding of the world, everything's pitch black. And when you learn something new, a little light is turned on, and now you can see part of that darkness. You can see part of reality. And the more lights that you have on, the more stuff you can see, the further you can see, the more things you can use, and the more successful you'll be. That's a weird metaphor to use, but I'm hoping this is how you illuminate the universe. And if you imagine for a second that business is this big, I'm just going to draw this here. Business is this big black square, and it's just pitch black and you can't, see anything. Well, if you want to understand business, all we're trying to do is take the core disciplines that make up a business or make up the study of business. And every time we learn one of these new rules, we just scratch away a little bit of darkness. And then eventually over time, if you're at the billionaire level and you understand all the disciplines so well, you've kind of got rid of most of this darkness and you can see things really clearly. So these things allow you to comprehend reality in a way more objective sense. Therefore, you can see better than other people, and therefore you make better decisions, you take better actions, you have better initiatives, you become more successful. So this is all abstract. So let's actually give an example. So one of the laws of economics that Adam Smith came up with is the law of self-interest. And the law of self-interest is pretty straightforward. It is what it says it is. People operate out of their own self-interest. And Benjamin Franklin summarized this pretty much perfectly when he said that if you were to persuade, appeal to interest and not to reason. And what this basically means is that the main thing that really drives human behavior commercially is incentive. And so this is just a law. This is just a rule of reality. It's a rule of commercial reality. And so understanding this first principle and understanding this rule, what I can basically do is now I can start to act in accordance with the objective nature of the world. And if I can act in accordance with the objective nature of the world, I'm going to be more successful because I'm not deluding myself. For example, a lot of people want to ignore this. Like primary example, with the whole Benjamin Franklin example, you're not going to convince someone by appealing to their reason to do something. Like it's very rare that you're actually going to get someone to do something just by giving them the right reasons. It's kind of like people who donate to charity. Like, what reason are you doing that to make yourself feel better? That's almost always the case. Or are you doing it for the moral reason as well? When you get into it, it gets a bit shady, but you get the point. So law of self-interest basically means everyone acts in their own self-interest, and it's just a law. It's the way the world works. And so when I'm building my company, and when I'm hiring new people and managing people, I understand that they're always going to act out of their own self-interest. And because of that, what I need to do is build incentives and create incentive structures in the company that facilitate people to act within their best interests. And when you can do something called incentive alignment, where your incentives or the company's incentives are aligned with the incentives of the individuals in your company, you're going to be successful. This is why, for example, I don't pay any of my sales reps a base salary, because base salaries, they create comfort and they create, there's no incentive. But if I give a sales rep a really good commission structure, then they have the self-interest to go and sell those many deals as they can because they can make as much money as they can. And therefore, I can make more money as well. And so our incentives are aligned. And Charlie Munger said this. He said, in business, if you're not focused on incentives, you're focusing on the wrong thing, which I think is pretty telling. So incentives are really the main thing. And so that's just an example of using a discipline or a principle from a discipline to make a better business decision. And so when you're running your company and you're not sure what to do and you're not sure what decision to make, and you're kind of paralyzed because you're not sure exactly what move you should make, it's because you're missing the principles of the things surrounding that. Another example I can give you is the law of diminishing returns. So in my company right now, this is just economics. I'll give you some more examples in a while. But in my company right now, I'm spending around $100,000 a month on ads. So we spend nearly $1 million a year on running ads. And I'm aware of the law of diminishing returns, which is basically a statement that means that past a certain point of input in a system, the output will diminish. And what that means is that I could get up to 150 grand a month on ads before my profit margin starts to shrink or my cost per call massively spikes. And this is because there are certain constraints and limits to all systems. Like if I can't just spend infinite money on this thing and scale it to $1 million a month overnight because the audience wouldn't support that growth. And so every single system or every single business has a point of diminishing return where it's no longer efficient to scale because it just diminishes. And it kind of looks like this on a graph where it kind of just starts to slope off. And then the input to output ratio is no longer asymmetric or advantageous to the running of the company. And so if you're trying to scale something or build something and you don't understand the law of diminishing returns and you start to experience diminishing returns, then the way that you're going to handle that is by trying to increase the inputs to get more and more outputs. But you've ignored a fundamental law of the universe. Part of your paradigm, part of your business understanding is dark. You can't see, and therefore you're going to ruin it. It's the same thing with supply and demand, for example. This is obviously a very straightforward discipline to apply, but supply and demand is really what governs the entire commercial machine. And what this basically means is that if there's too much supply, there's not going to be much demand. And if there's not much demand, then there's not going to be much supply. And so this is why when I'm starting any business or I'm looking at starting a company or investing in a company, the first thing that I look at is the demand. I'm like, is there actually demand for supply? And then the second thing that I'll look at is the supply and be like, is this supply actually meeting this demand? And if there's lots of people who are supplying really good things that are meeting the demands, then there's less opportunity to come in and disrupt the market. And so it's another example. And then obviously we have the incentives. So I can give you some more. I'm going to keep going because I've spent years and years and years studying these. So another example we'll get into, I'm going to just write some over here so I can remember what ones to refer to later. So another discipline is biology. So it's funny, you know, when you're in school, and like I was an idiot in school because I thought, like, you know, when you're in school and you're studying something and you kind of ask the teacher the question of like, when am I going to use this in the real world? Like, come on. Well, anyone that asks that question, like I now realize, is being an idiot. Because the answer is, if you want to build a successful company, you're almost always going to use every single piece of knowledge you have because it's all you have. Like, this billionaire explained to me, he said, like, people have got it all wrong in school. You want to pay attention in school because you're learning disciplines, you're learning first principles, you're learning methods of thinking. And so one thing that you probably learned in biology in school, much to your hatred or regret, you probably learned natural selection. And then another type of biological knowledge that you could use is intra versus inter species competition, or just competition in general. And there's quite a few. I'm sure some more will spring to mind as I go through, because I've studied biology at length. But one of the main ones here is natural selection, or at least evolution. And obviously, we've also got like the scientific method. Really up here, you've got the discipline of science. And then you can you see that up there? You can. And then you break science into physics. And then you also break it into chemistry. The study of the natural world is an incredible place to get mental models from to apply to your business. And then inside of physics, we've got all sorts of laws. Inside of chemistry, we've got all sorts of laws as well. And I get it. Like in school, if you don't know you want a business yet, it doesn't apply. But go and pick up a physics book and go and start reading about it, because this thing, like, if you understand physics and you understand the core disciplines of physics, it's so applicable. Like, it's unbelievably applicable to business. Like, I can give you one example in physics. If I just write here, friction. So friction is a model in physics. Which, the other one we've got here is velocity. You've got all sorts of, like, you've also got something called escape velocity. There's a lot. And friction is basically like how much force is required to move an object. And like when you put objects in the way of objects, obviously there's friction, so things move slower. And an example of using friction in business is building a funnel. If you have a funnel that has a lot of friction, which basically means that there's lots and lots of things in the way of someone moving through the conversion cycle, then the funnel won't work as well. And so you can actually diagnose and fix funnels and sales processes by using some random mental model from physics. So if I come into someone's business and I invest in someone's business and their funnel's not converting, the first place I'll look is, where's the friction in the funnel? Where is the bottleneck? Where's the friction? Why are we not moving value through? Why is throughput not flowing? And that's because I understand some random part of physics. The same thing could be used to describe escape velocity. So escape velocity is a term given to an object that has, basically this is like, how would you describe this? This is a mental model used to denote or describe the speed of an object that has it's like self-propelling, if that makes sense. So if you've got an object here and you want to move this object here over to here, then you need force to move this object, obviously. But if you push this object to a certain degree, what might start to happen is it might achieve escape velocity, which means a feedback loop kicks in, and this thing can now move on its own. So it's kind of like the term used to describe escape velocity, specifically without using an abstraction or an example, is like a plane, is like a rocket leaving the atmosphere. Like it's escaped the atmosphere, it's escaped the gravitational pull of the Earth to some degree, and now it can propel itself without any means of propulsion. Now, I don't know if that's exactly how it works, so I'm not a rocket scientist, but you can use escape velocity to describe all sorts of things in business. Like, for example, my YouTube channel recently just randomly blew up. It achieved escape velocity. It wasn't requiring
as much force as it used to achieve the speed of growth that I wanted it to. Velocity itself is basically just, this is just like, speed, if that makes sense. But it's extremely important to understand. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of little things in physics that you can use to do this, but I won't get into them now. So in biology, one of the main ones is natural selection. And this is a law from biology that is pretty much just summarizes it's beautiful, it summarizes every single system in the universe, which basically just states that it's not the strongest or the fittest that survive, but those most adapted to the environment in which they find themselves in. An interesting thing about evolution and Darwin's theory of natural selection is everyone thinks that, you've heard the phrase like it's survival of the fittest. Well, that's not exactly what that phrase means, because fittest is kind of a good way to summarize Darwin's theory. But everyone assumes that fittest means the personified version of the word, where it's about how healthy you are, or it's about how big you are, or how fit you are, essentially. That's the personification justification that is completely incorrect. When you study Darwinism and you study evolutionary biology, what you can understand is that fitness, or when an organism is fit, it's a reference to the level of adaptability the organism has to the environment. And so it's not, when someone says it's the fittest, it's the strongest or the fittest that survive, when they're saying fittest, the actual meaning of that word came from the idea that an organism has fitness, which actually means adaptability. The same thing here happened with Sigmund Freud, where when you read Freud's work, he talks a lot about sex, and he talks a lot about sex and parents and mothers, and people think that Freud was strange. And people think that everyone says, Freud just wanted to have sex with his mum. But what he actually was meant by sex in his writings was the word love, to denote like the purest form of love, without any physical intimacy or connection. And so it's really difficult to comprehend what a lot of these great people are saying, because you need to use their definitions, because stuff gets watered down and filtered down, and everything gets filtered down through time, and you need to go back to the source. So this is why, if you want to study natural selection, you need to understand what this means. But anyway, that's a story for another day. Darwin would be quaking in his boots if someone didn't understand that. So how can you use natural selection to get the hang of this? Well, I can give you an example. As a owner of a company, you might have a sales team, like I do, for example. I have 12 sales reps. And therefore, I am the environment. And so in nature, you have the environment. This represents the environment. And inside of that environment, you have organisms or species. And this represents an organism. And what happens is the environment basically sets the conditions for the survival of these organisms. And so if these organisms want to survive in this environment, then they must be adapted to this specifically. And so what happens over time is the environment sets the conditions, and if the organisms aren't adapted, they die. But the ones that do survive are the ones that are adapted, and then they go on to reproduce and produce, obviously, offspring that has the adaptation. And that's how adaptation happens over time, and that's how human beings came to be. Now, you could get into the whole theological argument, but I'm not going to. So what this means is, if this is my company, the environment is the company, and inside of the company I have sales reps, and I have a minimum quota or minimum standard that my sales reps must hit every single month in order to essentially stay at the job and to keep the company. If they want to stay in the job, they have to hit a certain number of sales and a certain number of cash. And if they don't hit those numbers, then we fire them. Effectively, they are removed from the environment. And what this does is it breeds strength, and it breeds fitness, and it breeds adaptability, because it means the reps that survive are the ones that have the traits that facilitate the outcome that the company wants. And therefore, I can use natural selection to, drive the best reps. And then what starts to happen after a while is these reps will reproduce. Now, not physically, I'd have a HR problem if that was the case. But the point is that the reps sort of reproduce in the fact that they start bringing in their friends, and they start attracting, talent that's very similar to them. And we find that the ones that are adaptable, they bring in the new reps, and they create a culture that facilitates, the same traits and stuff like that. And so you can create this melting pot of stuff. I'll do the same thing with building client acquisition systems, but that's just one example for now. Now, another example of using a biological discipline or using a biological principle to understand business and to illuminate that darkness of business and become successful and make money is intra versus interspecies competition.
And so what this basically means, and I can give you an example from Amazon in a second here, is we have competition in business is a fairly straightforward and understandable premise. And biology explains business very well, because if you think about the capitalistic structure of the world, I'm just going to write Amazon here real quick before I forget. If you think about the capitalistic structure of the world, it closely resembles that of the natural world. Because, you have an environment, which is the market, and you have organisms and species, which are companies, holding companies, or niches. Essentially, you have a niche. It's literally a niche. Where do you think we get the idea for a niche from? It's from biology. Where do you think we get the idea of competition from? It's from biology. Where do you think we get the idea of growth from? It's from biology. All of these terms that we use to just describe an everyday business that we think are business strategies, they come from this discipline. And if you can understand them from the root cause, you'll destroy everyone. And so the capitalistic structure that we follow in the West is akin to that of a natural environment. It's like a jungle, the environment or the market will set the conditions for survival, which is typically who can deliver value, who can sell, who can keep talent, who can create cultures and stuff like that. And if you can't do that as an entrepreneur, if you don't have the skills to create the traits in the business that facilitate survival, then you will die. And it's as simple as that. You just won't be successful. And so one thing we can do is understand that in biology, if we look at the natural world, there's competition on two levels. We have intraspecies competition and we have interspecies competition. And so intraspecies competition, this is basically when two members of the same species compete for resources. And so, for example, if you are in a colony of gorillas and there's two male gorillas, then you will have intraspecies competition for the best quality females, for example. And it's pretty relevant in today's world as well. But you get the point. We have competition within the same species. And intraspecies competition is extremely important because what it does is it encourages only the best people in that species are going to win, and therefore they're going to pass on the best genetics. The last thing you want is lazy gorillas that aren't going to do anything, that are just useless and pointless, getting all the girls. Because what's going to happen is we're just going to get more lazy gorillas. And that's kind of why the modern dating market is completely screwed, if you're wondering. Anyway, story for the day. But then, not only this, we have intraspecies competition, and then we have interspecies, so INTER. And this is competition that happens on an international level in the sense that we have competition between different species. And if you're wondering what we're competing for, it's almost always just resources for survival. So shelter, food, water, those are pretty much the main ones. There's a few other ones as well. And so this is where we have competition between different species. And the species that survive, this is kind of non-binary, and it's genius. You can apply this to business, and I'll explain an example. It's absolutely brilliant if you do this. Where you have different species competing for resources. So for example, if in a jungle, we have a colony of gorillas and we have a colony of apes or a different type of monkey, then they're going to compete for the same resources. They're going to compete for the same fruit. They're going to compete for the same trees. They're going to compete for the same water. They're going to compete for the same whatever, okay? But at the same time, a species becomes competitive only by having the best people in the species or the best organisms in the species. And so by having intraspecies competition, we create the best variants or the best organisms inside of that species so that we can then compete with other species for total domination and to build a monopoly. And an example of how this has been applied to business, and the best example I've ever found of someone using this, is in Amazon. And Jeff Bezos is an absolute genius for this. So what Amazon does is they obviously compete on an inter-level. They compete with other e-commerce businesses. They basically destroyed eBay. They compete with Alibaba. They compete with all these e-commerce dropshipping brands. They compete with basically everyone who sells everything. But the way that they gain their competitive advantage was by creating intraspecies competition. So Amazon competes on a global level as a company, but they also compete on a local level as a team. And so the way that Amazon structures their resource allocation, and what do we compete for in nature and biology? We compete for resources, right? It's pretty simple. And so the way that Amazon structures this is they get their teams, their internal teams, to compete for resources. And teams that get the best results in Amazon are allocated more resources, and teams that do not get the best results in Amazon are allocated less resources or fired. And so what we have here is we have intraspecies competition. And the reason why Amazon can compete on the global international level between big companies It's because they have the best intra-competition. They've created the best internal teams by having this intra-species competition, by making their teams compete with each other. And I do this with my sales reps as well. So I'll pit them against each other. We'll create leaderboards. We'll create competition inside of the species so that we can have the best organisms rising to the top, so that when I have to compete on an inter-level, I've got the best warriors, so to speak. And so these are just two little, but they're not little, they're very significant principles from biology. But these are just two things that I can just use in my business and explain. And there's a ton of principles from biology as well, that you can use to become successful. And if you want to understand how to learn these disciplines and study them, well, really what you're going to have to do, and this is what this billionaire told me, because I've already done this, but I need to do it again because I've forgotten a lot of stuff. What you can do is essentially you go to Amazon, or you go to one of the best colleges in the world, like Harvard or Oxford or Cambridge or whatever, and you pick a discipline. So, for example, there's a ton. You could pick psychology, you could pick sociology, you could pick music, you could pick philosophy, you could pick chemistry, you could pick whatever, reason, blah, blah, blah. In fact, I'm going to write that one down. You pick a discipline, and what you do is you go to the best colleges that teach that discipline. So, for example, if I wanted to learn the discipline of law, I'd go to Harvard, and you don't go to Harvard, you go to Harvard's website. And then what you do is you find out the mandatory early reading for the first year of that degree. And, because what these universities and colleges will do is they will mandate specific textbooks. And these are typically the introductory textbooks to the discipline. And that's all you need to read. And so, for example, I can give you an example of recently, or not recently, but something I did a while ago. I wanted to learn evolutionary biology, because in biology, you've got the discipline of biology, and then inside of that, you've got a discipline called evolutionary biology, which is just explaining how we evolved. And I went to Harvard, I think it was Harvard, or Oxford, or Cambridge, or one of the big universities that's the best. And I found out that the book that everyone reads at the start of that course is Evolutionary Biology by Dr. David Buss. And this guy is kind of like what Adam Smith is to economics, or what Freud is to psychology. He's the founding father of this discipline. And so I bought this textbook for like 80 quid, 80 pounds on evolutionary biology, and I read it. And what these introductory textbooks will do is they will just highlight the first principles and the core assumptions that the entire discipline is built upon. And all you have to do is read those. So I've read introductory textbooks on as many disciplines as I could possibly think of. And a lot of them you don't apply and aren't that useful, but most of them, they will be extremely useful. Another great couple of books that you can buy, these are red hardback books, and they're called The Great Mental Models. And there's 3 volumes, and the first volume is on general thinking concepts, where you'll learn about things like Hanlon's razor and how to reason. The second book is on, I believe, physics, biology, and chemistry. And then the third book is on systems and mathematics. And, systems is, oh my God, that's an entire, I could talk for hours about that thing. But what you want to do is you want to, basically you just want to become multidisciplinary. You want to find all these disciplines, because, and the point I'm making here, with just even those maybe like couple of examples, is you don't study business. You don't get good at business. That's not how it works. If you want to be a good businessman, you have to understand everything. And to contextualize this and draw it out, if this here is business, then this is decentralized to so many things where, this applies to this and then this applies to this. I'm just going to draw some of these out. Blah, blah, blah. This is just a map of this is actually centralized decentralization, which is another discipline that you can use. But think of it like this. If this is studying business, well, the only way that you get good at this is by learning this thing, this thing, this thing, and then this thing, which teaches you this thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing. And then, this could be biology, this could be psychology, this could be economics, this could be statistics, this could be law, etc. And so we're looking to define the first principles and axioms of the core disciplines so we can then come in and apply them to the business. You don't get good at business. You get good at everything else. That way you get extremely intelligent, and then you can actually create value. It's going to take a sip of water here. And that's how I did it, And that's how most billionaires do it, and this is how most billionaires think. They don't try to get good at business, they just try to get good at everything. And then by getting good at everything, or at least understanding the entry-level concepts of every single discipline, dude, the advantage that gives you is it's incomprehensible. When you learn to think like this and when you learn to do this properly and you can start to like make decisions and solve problems in your company based on core assumptions that are truthful about the entire world, you ruin everyone. So think of it like this. The example I gave you earlier of business is pretty apparent, but I just thought of an idea. So imagine that this here is reality. And a pretty core assumption that I think we can all agree on is that in order to like become successful and make money, you kind of need to see the world properly. You need to be right, basically. And the best way to be right consistently is to actually understand the truth. Okay? It's pretty simple. So what I want you to understand for a second here, or visualize, is that this big box represents reality. And right now, you don't really know what is true and what is not. You don't really have an accurate gauge on the universe. You might have a little bit of a gauge on the universe, but not significantly. And so all of this black stuff here represents darkness. You can't really see reality for what it is. It's not clear. You don't really know what you're dealing with. This is how pretty much every single human being on the planet lives their life. They don't really know what is true. They don't really know what the world is actually like and how it actually works. And they just fail and everything's bad. And basically what happens here is, I want you to imagine this is all colored in. This is just a big black, it's big old void of darkness basically that you can see here. And when you're born, you don't really know anything about this thing. When you go through school, you open up a little bit of it. But this is a big black box. Every time that you learn a new discipline, like you unlock part of this square. And so becoming successful is about removing as much darkness from this reality thing as possible. And so let's say, for example, that you take it upon yourself to read the 2 or 3 core foundational textbooks on biology. So disciplines, they represent the study of reality or a portion of reality. And if you understand them, what happens if, let's just say you study biology, you just unlock a little bit of darkness here. Just by understanding just the core principles, you've unlocked a little bit of reality. Now you can see clearer. Not that much clearer, because there's still a ton of work to do, but by understanding the biology thing, let's just make this a little bit bigger. And if I just do this in blue. Oh, I just dropped my pen lid. It's a good job I'm not live, I'd be a terrible teacher. But by understanding biology, you've unlocked a small portion of reality, which means that you can now see clearer and operate better in the world than most people in this regard. So when it's time to apply biology to your business, you can do it. And then let's say that, over here, there's another study or another discipline that opens up a little bit for you. And this is psychology. Okay? So now you've learned the core centralized axioms of 2 disciplines. You can see a little bit clearer. Everything's still very hazy and dark. You still can't see much. You don't understand really how the world works, but you understand a little bit. And then let's say that, over here, we remove a little bit of the darkness and we open our eyes a little bit more. And here we learn law. And then, we do it again over here. And here we learn statistics. And then, you open it again a little bit over here, just a little bit. And over here, we've learned systems, or systems theory, or systems thinking. And then we've got another one over here. And, you've studied warfare. And then you've got another little one over here. And, maybe you've studied sociology. You've got to understand, learning is about understanding how the world works. And the better you understand how the world works, and the better that your gauge of reality is, the more accurate your decision making will be, the more likely you are to actually be right and in alignment with the truth, the better your business will do. And, let's just keep going. We'll rub this one out and we'll rub this one out. And what you're trying to do when you're learning stuff is you're just trying to rub out as much darkness as possible. And you can see here, someone that gets this many disciplines and understands all of the core principles here, they can see a lot of stuff. Before you know it, you're going to start to get pretty damn clear. You can see through a lot of these things. There's still a lot of darkness and you're still never going to understand how the world works completely. But, let's say that here you've studied music theory and here you've done chemistry and here you've done physics, and here you've done maths, you know. And then, I mean, what else have we got? Here you've got reason, you know, like how to actually reason. You know, then over here we've got philosophy. You know, there's so many things that you can learn and study. You know, like another one could be, you know, like here we've got accounting. What else could we think about adding here? I suppose you've got environmental science, and that's just kind of applied biology, isn't it? But you get the point. You know, what we're doing every time we learn a new discipline and we learn the truth, the core founding principles of that discipline, we open it up. Like another one you could study virology. You could even study oncology, understand the first principles of cancer and how that works. Because I'm sure you could probably use the principles of cancer and apply them in your business, like unwanted growth, like how you control that, how you manage it, how you diagnose it, how does stuff get out of hand. You know, another one you can study is virology. The sciences are pretty damn good and pretty damn useful, but I think you get the point. And so your job really with life, and this takes a long time to do, but your job with life is basically to open up as many of these blind spots as possible so you can see through and you can see super clear. And the more of these you have available and the less darkness there is, the more likely you are to be right and make the right decision. The problem that I see, if I just like scribble all these out here, the problem that we see in reality with most people is they only learn one discipline. Okay? And so let's just scribble all these out for a second here. And let's just leave psychology. So let's say that someone's gone through life and the only thing they've learned is psychology. Their entire life has been built around one discipline of psychology. Well, that's fine, and you can get really good at one thing, but it's still only going to open up a small portion of reality for you. And there's a quote that says, and this was actually used to describe B.F. Skinner, who was a psychologist, ironically. Charlie Munger summarized B.F. Skinner's work. B.F. Skinner was all about positive reinforcement and using reward and pain to drive behavior. And he believed that the entire human condition could be boiled down to the simple theory of like reward and pain, which there's merit in that, but not quite. And the problem with Skinner in his studies, and the reason that he got fired from his job and lost all of his credibility, even though he was an absolute psychological genius, the problem with him was that he was a man with a hammer. And what that means is to the man with a hammer, every problem seems to look like a nail. And what that basically means is Skinner tried to use his theory to explain every single facet of human behavior that he came across. And so if he came across a baby crying on a train, he would say, oh, my theory can explain that, when sometimes it might not. And so the problem with most people is they get good at one thing, or they learn one thing, and then they see the entire world just through this one discipline. And they're not seeing the full picture. They're not thinking holistically about how the world works. They're centralizing it to one specific thing. And that's okay, and you can do that if you want to just be a therapist. That's fine, because then really that's going to be your main job. But if you want to be a billionaire or a conqueror or an idiosyncrasy or a genius or an innovator or someone that completely changes the world, you can't just have one discipline, because you're so blind that people who can see will beat you. If you want to win and you want to outcompete people, you need to see the full thing. And how do you do that? You open up all of these slots by basically learning and studying. And you don't have to there's a few different ways that you can learn these disciplines, and I'm going to write them here. The first one is obviously textbooks. The second one is obviously YouTube videos. You can do biographies. You know, for example, I wanted to study the discipline of the unconscious, although it's not really a discipline, it's obviously part of psychology, but unconscious psychology. So the first thing I did was I read Memories, Dreams and Reflections by Carl Jung. It's his autobiography, like the founding father of the unconscious. And you will learn a lot about the unconscious and the founding principles of it from biographies. So, you know, you've got biographies, you've got documentaries, you've got all sorts of different things. But what you're really looking to do is you're looking to go to the source. This is the key thing. You're looking to get to basically the founder. So, for example, if you want to study the discipline of genetics, which is the study of how genes work and the genetic code, it would help if you studied Watson and Crick, who were the people that discovered the double helix. They basically discovered that we even had genetics in the first place. If you wanted to study, history, that's a pretty difficult one, but you'd study Livy, who was a Roman historian who kind of started almost writing the first. We've had records of history before that, but accurately, properly depicted from the Roman times, from when we started to actually sort of. Obviously, we had. No, you've got Greek historians that are probably more apparent than that. Okay, I'll give you a better example. If you want to study medicine and like how doctors work and stuff, then you study Hippocrates. I think it's Hippocrates or Hippocrates, definitely not Hippocrates. Hippocrates. He was the guy that basically, he was like the first doctor to have ever lived. If you want to study reason and how to reason, you'd study Pericles, who was a Greek politician who kind of was like one of the founding fathers of reason. Or, if you want to study Stoicism, you'd study Seneca, or you'd study Socrates, or you study Epictetus, or you study Aristotle. If you want to study warfare, you get the point. You go all the way to the source and the bottom, and if you're not going here, you're wasting your time. If you want to study economics, you study Adam Smith. If you want to study psychology, you study Freud or study Jung. You find the person that basically founded the discipline, and you learn from them. Because everything that's downstream from them is pretty much waste time. So now that I've helped you visualize this, I'm going to give you a couple more examples that I've used in my business recently to do this. And the whiteboard's just going to have to look a little bit messy. I'm sure you'll deal with that. So let's talk about statistics. So statistics is basically just, the study of the phenomenon of mathematical emergence. And what that basically means is these are kind of like laws for numbers, pretty much. And so one example I can give you from statistics is the idea of regression to the mean. And regression to the mean is an extremely important mental model to use. And what this basically means from statistics is that it's like a founding law. It's a first principle that cannot be further argued. It basically states that numbers in small data sets do not present reliable averages. Or averages don't properly manifest until large enough data is given. And so what that means is that if I flip a coin, if I flip a coin and it goes heads, let's say I flip a coin, 5 times. Let's say it goes heads, 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 and then tails. Well, an idiot would look at this and say this coin has an 80% chance of landing on heads because I flipped it 5 times and it landed on heads 5 times. And so they'll say this coin is rigged. It landed on heads 5 times and it only landed on tails once. So therefore it has an 80% chance of landing on heads. And that might be true in an extremely small data set of 5 flips. But if you fractalize this and went out to 500, you'd probably find that the average would come out to be more like, 49% or 48% or 50%. Because averages do not present themselves in small data sets. And so an example of how I've used this in my company recently is I could have, a sales rep, one sales rep. And let's say that they have an average conversion rate of 20%, which means they convert 1 in every 5 deals. Well, let's say they do 20 calls a week. We'll keep it real simple. We'll say that they do 30 calls a week. Okay? Now, let's say, that in a month, therefore, actually, let's do it like this. No, we'll keep 30. So what this means is that in a week, they do 30 calls, but they have a 20% conversion rate historically. And one week might go by, and they might get 0 sales. They might have absolutely no deals coming from 30, which means they have like a really terrible conversion rate. That's absolutely no deals. Well, this is just 1 week. This is just 30 calls of data. I know that if I give them 300 calls, they're more likely to get to this 1 in 5 average because this is called regression to the mean. And regression basically means like a gradual anti-progress towards a specific outcome. And so you'd be stupid to fire this sales rep after 1 week of poor performance because you haven't given them enough time to present their averages. And it's the same thing with spending money on ads, for example. I might get, tomorrow, I could get no appointments at all, even though I'm spending $3,000 on ads. It's very unlikely. I could get half the appointments as usual. And I could look at that tomorrow and be like, oh,
oh my God, half the appointments as usual, we're in trouble, I need to go and change a bunch of stuff, and then go and change all my stuff, when in reality, it was just regression to the mean. It was just a bad time. And so numbers, always, for the most part, they represent themselves on like, something like this, where, it might go up and down, but the thing is you're not looking, like, you never want to look at the peak or the trough. You always want to look at the average, which is the sum of all of these parts divided by the whole, like this. And so what I can do is, whilst the system might be creating chaotic results and going massively up and down, what I can do is discern the average of that system to make better decisions and understand what's actually going to happen in the long term. And so that's just one small thing from statistics that you can use to apply to your business and bring order to chaos and make better decisions and make things way better. It's an example of clearing out a little smudge of reality just so you can see slightly clearer, so that next time you have a numerical anomaly that panics you and freaks you out, you know how to deal with it properly and not panic and actually not stress, because you can see reality for what it is. Obviously, if this trend went on for 6 months, I'm like panicking. I don't make any decisions on stuff with 1 week or 1 day of data. I just don't, because it's not enough. Although the time frame isn't representative of the average, obviously the actual volume is, but that's a story for another day. So another example I can give you is reason. So the study of reason is an interesting discipline, because Epictetus believed this. He said that if you read Discourses by Epictetus, which is like my favorite book ever, by the way, it's like I've read it like 100 times. It's not even an exaggeration. Epictetus says at the start of Discourses, or it's also called the Epichrondon or something, I don't know. Anyway, it's called Discourses by Epictetus. He was an orator, and he was a verbal philosopher, but his students wrote all of his lessons down, and you can read them in Discourses. And Epictetus said, at the start of Discourses, he says, reason is the only discipline that can study itself, therefore it is the most valid. Because all the other disciplines, they can't study themselves, but reason can pull itself apart. And so, one example I can give you from the discipline of reason, I mean, there are a lot. For example, you've got Socratic reasoning, you've got non-binary reasoning. There's all sorts, but another one is Hanlon's razor. Another one is Occam's razor. I mean, there's an awful lot that you can get from studying how to reason. And I'll give you an example. So Hanlon's razor, this is a mental model from the discipline of reason, and it basically states that do not attribute to malice that which can easily be explained by stupidity. So I'll repeat that. Do not attribute to malice that which can easily be explained by stupidity. And what that basically means is that if someone does something to you that pisses you off, don't assume they've done it out of spite or hate, just assume they've done it because they're an idiot. Now, sometimes someone's going to do something to you out of spite or hate, and you should deal with that. But for example, if one of my clients did something stupid or triggered a refund request or something, my first reaction is to attribute their action to stupidity, not malice. Another example could be like, so let's say, okay, we'll take the client example and how you would apply this in business. Let's say that a client has, let's say they've written a 1-star review on Trustpilot or something. And on the review, they say, this course, it isn't good, like I haven't been able to apply it to my business, whatever, blah, 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 this program sucks. Well, instead of attributing that to malice or hatred, I'll start by asking myself, are they being stupid, right? Are they not have it together? And I'll reach out to them. And this actually happened once where I reached out to a client and said, like, he wrote a 1-star review. And I said, hey man, like, saw the review. I'm just keen to hear you out and understand, what's going on. And he basically said like, yeah, this thing just, it sucks and I just can't, like, it's really outdated. And I was like, okay, well, tell me about it. And it turns out that what had happened is we basically, he had access to the existing program, but he was a legacy client. And what that meant is he had access to the old program. But what he was doing is he was using the old version of the program, which was like 2 years old and completely outdated, thinking it was the main program. And so obviously, understandably, he's like, this is all outdated, I can't use this anymore. So I'm going to write a 1-star review. So he was just being stupid.
Like, he's not being an idiot, it's just a mistake, it's an accident, right? So what I could have done with that review is attributed it to malice and taken it personally and been like, dickhead, out you go, I don't care about you anymore. But instead I was like, okay, Hanlon's razor, do not attribute to malice that which can be explained by stupidity. Let's see if he is being stupid, and if he is, then we corrected it. And I was like, okay, man, well, look, obviously you're in the wrong program. You know, we gave you access to both, so you could use both, but you're using the wrong one. So let's bring you in here, remove the review. You can rewrite it if you want to in 6 months. Now he makes 20 grand a month. So that's one example. Another example is Socratic reasoning, which is a method of reasoning developed by Socrates, of all people. By the way, look at this thing. I don't know if I've shown you this before. This is a drawing that someone did for me of Epictetus, who's my favorite Stoic philosopher. Just kind of thought I'd show you that. I don't know why, to be honest, but I think it's absolutely sick. It's one of the coolest gifts I've ever received. Anyway, Socratic reasoning is basically the art of asking why and critically thinking through things and saying why like 5 times, basically, until you get to the truth. So like, if I have a problem in my business or someone wants to do something, I'll be like, why? And then they'll be like, I don't know. And then you're like, okay, well, why don't you know? And you just keep going and keep going. And really, solving a problem in business is about defining the problem. And the easiest way to do that is you start by just basically asking why. And then you've got non-binary reasoning. I could make a whole 2-hour video on this, so I'm not going to do it now. If you want me to make a video on non-binary reasoning, comment. And if it gets enough likes, then I can entertain that. Once again, it's not a shiny object video, but my God, is it powerful. So if people want that, I'll do that. And then Occam's razor is a discipline, or a part of this discipline of reason, which basically just states that if you've got 2 options, you should just use the simple one. It's an advocacy for simplicity, essentially. So, you know, that's reason. And honestly, like, there's a lot more. I wanted to get into some other ones as well, like systems thinking and systems theory. Like an example of a discipline right now, it's quite hot, is systems theory. And the core premise of systems theory is holistic thinking, which means that when you're making decisions around variables in a system, like a business is a system, right? Which is why it's so important to understand systems theory. You need to think holistically and consider the non-linear relationships of the variables. So, for example, if I've got, you know, multiple departments over here, like marketing, management, sales, funnels, and accounting, if I've got, you know, 5 different disciplines, the thing is not disciplines, sorry, but 5 different variables, these are all intertwined. So all of the parts of your business, they're like a web and they're interlaced. And what this means is that if I make a change in my, I don't even know what the hell I wrote here, but if I make a change in my accounting, or if I make a change in, you know, my marketing, or if I make a change in my funnel or my taxes or something, it's going to affect everything else. And so if I introduce a new product, I don't just mess with the product side of the business, I mess with every other part of the business. And so this is basically called holistic thinking, or holisticism, and this comes from systems theory, which is a discipline that studies the phenomena of systems and how they operate and how they manifest. There's another discipline related to systems called systems thinking, which is pioneered by a woman called Donella Meadows, which explains how systems operate in like how an actual machine would operate, if that makes sense. So they're 2 different things. Like the systems theory is more focused on the environment, and the systems thinking is more focused on the entities that operate within that environment to create inputs into outputs and process them. And there's a whole thing for another day. There's so many. I could sit here for 5 hours and give you 500 examples of different things that I've got from different disciplines that I use in my company. And I'm not done with this. I've got a long, long way to go. There's dozens more disciplines that I need to study and understand if I want to really get the hang of this. But I've known this for a long time, and I've been doing this for a long time. And it was very reassuring and gratifying for someone who has literally made billions and billions of dollars to basically say to me, hey dude, you're kind of doing the right thing. This is how I see it. And so I want to thank that person. See you later.